Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our distinguished guests. Aimer Benuda, International Vice President of ABBA Technology. Valerie Labi, CEO of Wahul. Mia Lalou-Filali, CEO of Pharma5. Farouk Saleh, CEO, Metro Capital Advisory Group. Jill Veas, CEO of Infraco Africa. Our discussion will be moderated by David Pilling, Africa Editor, Financial Times.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. My name's David Pilling. I'm the Africa editor of the Financial Times. We're about to discuss a topic that's actually very dear to my heart, and I personally think is possibly the most important topic under discussion here at this summit. This is the question of Made in Africa. The title is Unlocking the Potential of Global Manufacturing. But let me just try and put a very quick spin on what I think we're here to discuss. So I'm the Africa editor of the FT, but I used to be the Asia editor of the FT, and I have seen, a number of countries, including latterly Vietnam, Bangladesh, but of course classically Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, China, Singapore, Malaysia, etc., come from being, basically poor countries to becoming middle income and even in many cases wealthy countries. And it's my belief, some of the panelists may have different beliefs, but it's my belief that that was basically done through manufacturing, not exclusively, but that without manufacturing, without developing manufacturing made in those countries, their development would have been impossible. Now we can discuss that, but that is what I would argue. I wrote a column in the FT last week, purely coincidentally, about small and medium businesses and about smallholder farmers, in which I sort of argued that there was a cult of the micro-entrepreneur and the smallholder farmer. And in fact, industrialization really is bigger companies putting expertise together, scale, specialization, and that only through that can you go from being, a poor individual trying to scrabble for a living to something that looks more like a modern economy that gives the wherewithal for people to survive and thrive, more importantly. In some ways, Africa has been going backwards. Of course, we're talking about 54 different countries. The one we're in clearly that's not the case, and we will talk about Morocco. But in terms of manufacturing as a percentage of GDP across the continent has shrunk in the last 20 years. It has not increased. ASSET, which is an excellent think tank based in Accra, the African Center for Economic Transformation, headed by K.Y. Yamaoka, who many of you will know. They've done a very in-depth study, and they found that on all 5, I think, main indices that a lot of countries have gone backwards in the last 20 years. For example, in terms of economic diversity, the average African economy, their top 5 exports account for 70% of their total exports, which shows a sort of, you could argue, a dangerous concentration. And of course, in many cases, that will be a single commodity, an oil or a copper or a gold. Of course, this is not hopeless. There are many examples across the continent where countries have done well, and of course many more where individual companies have done well against the odds. The Mauritian textile industry, which launched that country's, in a sense, quite spectacular growth. Textiles was really the start of that. Ethiopia has had a go with the apparel industry. It's been sort of an experiment that's been interrupted and that's been difficult, but they've certainly had a go. Gagan Gupta, who I believe was here yesterday, is an individual entrepreneur who's trying to, for example, in Benin, turn Benin cotton into Benin t-shirts and Benin raw cashew nuts into something that you would see in Marks and Spencer or Carrefour as a finished product. And of course, I leave to last the country that we're in, Morocco. And in some ways, Morocco has had a classic and very highly successful trajectory where it's gone from not having a car industry really 15 years ago to now surpassing Poland and South Africa, or certainly neck and neck with those two countries in terms of the number of cars produced. It exports them, so it has to be internationally competitive. And we've seen that in pharmaceuticals, which we'll be able to discuss, thankfully, with Mia, one of our panelists. We've seen it in aerospace. We've seen it in other industries. Amer will be able to talk about some of that. I want to start with the big picture, but then I'm very keen to go quite into detail and talk about the sort of practicalities of setting up manufacturing businesses. That's, I promise, the most you'll hear from me. I'm now going to turn this over to the panelists. Let me just start with Gilles, if I may. You live in Casablanca. You're the CEO of a company called Infraco, but you're also an observer of Morocco. And you've seen, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to give it a glowing, totally glowing report, but certainly a lot has gone right here. How has Morocco been able to build up a successful manufacturing industry in not one sector, but in several sectors? And I guess it might be interesting to ask, where do you see it going from here? Because, of course, development is a constant game. You're in constant competition with other countries. So how has it got here, and where does it go?
Thank you very much, David, for your opening remarks. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Infraco Africa, which is part of the Private Infrastructure Development Group, headquartered in London. I think, starting from the general to the more specific, first of all, Morocco has a vision, a long-term vision, spearheaded by His Majesty the King, and together, that vision has enabled to steer the country along a road which has delivered what you've just mentioned now, a highly industrialized country with a share of the GDP of manufacturing that's probably about 25%. So I think certainly the political stability, the administrative clarity of the frameworks, and the vision is very important. And then you've also got very good infrastructure. Morocco has a very well developed power sector with 99% access of electricity at relatively competitive prices. Very good internal and external connectivity. So easy to move goods around, to move raw materials around, and also a very well-developed workforce, which I guess reflects the high quality of the education and the fact that a lot of Moroccan citizens are studying in Morocco and also abroad. So very good engineers, finance people, economists. Those are some of the factors that I think have made manufacturing so successful in Morocco.
I think that's an excellent starting point. I mean, you could contrast that with other economies that I won't name, where you could argue that you don't have that vision, where you have maybe a rentier class that is quite happy to kind of extract rent from raw materials, and it's not particularly in its interest to develop manufacturing's hard. I mean, it's a complicated game. You need to invite other people in. They may be your competition. They may eat your lunch. It may be easier for people who've got hold of resources just to keep them. Anyway, that's just my observation. Let me turn, if I may, to Valerie. Now, you're from Ghana. You have a president who came to the FT Africa Summit, actually, about 4 years ago, not long after he was inaugurated. He talked a big game. He was going to have a factory in every province, enough of exporting cocoa abroad. Ghana was going to make chocolate. Some of this has happened, but I think it's generally been a bit disappointing, and we know that Ghana has run into trouble macroeconomically. But what I actually want to talk to you about is your experience. So you are trying to manufacture in Ghana. Tell us what you're trying to do and tell us how it's been.
Yeah, thank you. So at Wahoo Mobility, we locally design and manufacture electric vehicles or connected electric vehicles. And so I've been on a journey of setting up an EV zone in the center of Accra, which has a number of components to it. Most vehicles that you see on the continent now and have not been designed for Africa in mind. And we know that over the next 10 years, every vehicle on the continent is going to change. And it is very important that we now start to structure our industrial revolution as Africans around seizing the potential of locally manufacturing electric vehicles that have been tailored for Africa. And that's really our starting point. And I think to your point on, is it possible in Ghana? Is it possible to actually localize value chains for something as complicated as automotive? I would say yes, but there are four main elements or pillars that we need to really, that need to work together in order for it to be possible. The first thing for me is entrepreneurship. At the moment, the narrative for entrepreneurship in Africa has focused on digital platforms. But we need to really look at how do we create a path for entrepreneurs to go from startup to established manufacturers at scale. And that starts with creating the enabling environment from a policy perspective, and that's really the next pillar, is how are regulators creating a path for innovation of product, for a beneficial ownership of IP, and also investing in raw material value chains to actually ensure that there's the right enabling environment. The third part is really around academia. We talk about manufacturing, but we don't really look at talent. And I think in Ghana specifically, we have a very strong base of engineering talent. If you go to many of the automotive companies across the world, you would find Ghanaian, Nigerian, African engineers as the heart of that. So we need to start also looking at if we are going to be meaningful about creating a manufacturing industry for electric vehicles on the continent, how do we also attract talent back, but how do we also co-create products with international engineers working with African engineers? And then finally for me, it's really around investment. The investment that we're seeing in the startup ecosystem is not enough, or it's not focused on the capex that is needed to set up factories. And I think that these four pillars, the entrepreneurship, regulators, academia, and VCs working together, will create the right environment. And in Ghana currently, we have the entrepreneurship environment. I would say we have the talent, but our biggest barrier is our regulatory environment has been set up for import. And now at Wahoo Mobility, I think this is one of the biggest challenges for us, is to kind of prove that we have a proof of concept that's scalable.
So just paint a picture of your factory. I mean, does your factory exist and what's coming out of it? And when you're talking about e-mobility,
Yeah.
I mean, you may end up with an e-Jag or something, but you're talking right now about bikes, yeah? About what we would call a pedal bike,
Yeah.
with a motorized EV element attached, and with the delivery sort of sector, the Deliveroo type sector, as your principal market. Is that right?
Yes, so we have started with a two-wheeler electric bike that is pedal assist, so it has both a pedal and a throttle. And we are at the stage now, by the end of this month, we would have our factory set up that would give us capability to do 200 bikes a month for export, not just in ECOWAS, but ideally across the continent. We are also in R&D stage of building our very first electric vehicle that's a four-wheeler tailored for Africa. So we're actually in R&D for what we call a skateboard design. That means that you can have the base of any vehicle and put any body around it. And I think for us now, we're at the stage where our primary market has been e-mobility as a service for delivery or gig economy workers. And so the e-bikes that we build are connected to a digital platform, which allows us to distribute the bike directly to delivery workers, offering payment plans, but also brokering the carbon that's avoided by our electric vehicles on the compliance markets.
We'll come back to finance and stuff, and I must move on to other panelists. But let me just, you said that the regulatory environment is kind of lacking. What is preventing you making e-bikes in Accra?
So I think the first thing for us is our current environment really focuses on producing in Ghana and exporting. There isn't a fiscal environment or tax concessions if you want to produce in Ghana and sell in Ghana. So I think that's the first thing.
You're penalized for that.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think from an innovation perspective, like I mentioned, we are in R&D of our electric car. We've built and designed our own chassis. But there is no actual regulatory path to get a chassis number in Ghana because all the cars that we have on the road have been imported.
So you can't even get a chassis number?
So we can't even get a chassis number.
So technically that would mean that they're sort of illegal, these bikes, or
yes.
You're in a grey zone, let's say.
Exactly. So I think it's a grey zone. If we were just assembling vehicles that were already on the ground, then there's a path. But because we're actually innovating a new climate-smart technology, there is no actual regulatory path or guideline for new technologies designed in Africa to actually be recognized by law and scaled.
So you're almost being penalized for trying to manufacture and sell in Ghana. Okay, we'll get back to some of this and the finance. Let me turn to Mia. I mean, that's very much a kind of a startup, I guess. You're at the startup phase. I think, Mia, it's fair to say, you're the CEO of a business that's more established. Just sketch out, first of all, just so the audience understands what it is you do, the nature of your business, how much you produce, what you produce, where you sell to, just so we have a picture, and then I can ask some follow-up questions about how you got there and where you might go.
Thank you. So let me first take the opportunity to congratulate the organizer of this forum for choosing this theme that is absolutely essential for the emergence of our continent. So as you said, the business I'm running now with my sister has been created by my father more than 40 years ago, and his idea was to create a pharmaceutical industry in order to allow first our country, second our continent, to be sovereign in the matter of access to healthcare. So, the development of our business has really been porté, I don't know how to say it in English, by the global acceleration of industry in our country. As Gilles said, first there is this strong vision of our king concerning industrialization of our country, but also this led us to shift absolutely the mindset of entrepreneurship in Morocco. So as 40 years ago, saying that you were proud to not only to produce, but to develop 100% made in Morocco products, it was very hard to be heard. And 40 years later, our country and my industry specifically has turned into a mindset of makers, and made in Morocco now is no more only a motto, is something we strongly believe in. And today I meet a lot of young entrepreneurs, young startup leaders, and today Moroccan people, they all want to produce Moroccan products.
Right.
So coming back to my company, So today we are a middle-sized company, 100% specialized in generic drugs, and we have it integrated 80% of the value chain. We do our own R&D, we develop our product, we produce them, we control them, we distribute them, and today we are the leader of generics in Morocco with more than 30% of market share, but also our Made in Morocco brand today is ranking 6th among more than 1,200 companies in Africa, which means you can become a leader, a regional leader, of course, if you meet the excellence
Yes.
that you need to meet, especially in the pharma sector, you can compete even though your market, the size of your natural market is small. You can compete, you can be competitive either in quality and in pricing,
Yes.
of course. But of course, this has been possible thanks to a strong push state politics.
Yeah. Which therapeutic areas are you in, and how much of your revenue is accounted for by exports versus domestic sales?
More than 25% today
Is what, sorry, is
export.
export. Okay.
More than 25% today is export, absolutely.
And which therapeutic areas? I mean, are you across the board? Do you produce
So-
generic cancer medicines, or is it painkillers?
We have a very, very wide range of products. We are very specialized in antibiotics,
Okay.
which was considered until today as a problem for African countries.
Yes.
But today you see that Europe has shortages on antibiotics.
Sure.
We don't have shortages on antibiotics because we produce them locally. So we have gastroenterologists, we are present in health issues like tuberculosis, diabetes, cardiology, but also in hepatitis C, for example.
Yes. And are they FDA approved? I mean, could you sell to America? Could you sell to
We are not FDA approved.
Okay.
We are approved, GMP approved,
Yes.
Morocco GMP approved. We are approved by all the countries, more than 40 countries we are exporting to. We are approved by the GCC, the
Yes.
Saudi Arabia also, which is a very stringent authority. We are approved by, and we are now on track, for what we call the ANSM, which is the French approval,
Okay.
to be able now to export also to Europe, but also to the Atlantic.
Right.
As His Majesty the King made the opening ceremony and was talking about the Atlantic position of
Yes.
Morocco, we are looking, of course, at north, but also
Yes.
West.
We'll come back. There's a lot to talk about, including what happened during COVID and the
Absolutely.
vulnerability of the
With
continent.
great
So we'll talk about that. Let me turn to Amer, somebody else who is manufacturing here in Morocco. Again, just tell us about your business first of all. Try and sketch out. I think you're in 2 main product lines. What do you make? How did you get here? Where are you going?
Thank you very much, David. Thanks for your welcome message as well. My name is Amer Benouda, Vice President of ABBA Technology Group. To make it simple, ABBA Technology is 2 activities. The first one is the industrial activity, manufacturing electronics components. And the second activity is digital, let's say, digital platform provider or connectivity solution provider. We are present in 2 verticals, which are the connected healthcare through different connected medical devices that we are manufacturing.
Yes.
As well as present in the second activity, which is the smart territories.
Smart cities.
Smart
yeah.
cities, absolutely.
So this is sensors, traffic lights.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we are manufacturing a large portfolio of sensors that can be used in different cities, and it's already implemented and deployed in Morocco, but also abroad.
Yes. Could your sensors, for example, be used on a self-drive car?
As well, it's
Yes.
one of the projects indeed that we are working on, especially from the automotive point of view. A lot of today, to answer to your question before turning back to what we are doing, today the car can be considered, for example, as a tool for a city.
Yes.
With a lot of sensors that's used by a car, the city can rely on those cars, for example, to identify the problems that's happening on the road.
Yes.
As a use case.
So the car itself is a sensor, yes.
Exactly. So otherwise, I think, so ABBA Technology was created 3 years ago, so it's a young company. We had to tackle all the investments on manufacturing line. Today we have 2 manufacturing plants, one dedicated to the electronics component and the second one to the molding structure.
Okay, where are they?
Both are in Casablanca.
In Casablanca.
Otherwise, the main office is in Casablanca as well. And we are present, so we have 2 offices in France and Spain, and we are exporting as well in almost 10 countries. The total of, during the last 3 years, we had exponential growth. Today we are more than 600 persons, split into the manufacturing plants, in the main offices, but also in some operations that we are managing, especially in the healthcare area.
Well, so the Financial Times has the fastest growing African companies list. I don't think you were on it this year, but you should apply next year because it sounds as though you ought to be on it. Where did your initial financing come from? Was this friends and family?
Absolutely, it's 100% from own financial aspects. So we didn't went to any fundraising or any fund program for the time being. It's a positive cash flow from the first day, and this is why I think it's important, especially for when we are talking about the startup, to focus on what is generating the business. So maybe from the challenges of unlocking the potential of Africa,
yes,
and especially the manufacturing in Africa, we can discuss a lot about the macro approach, which is the policies and the macro environment.
Yes.
But we have also to focus on the business side. So at the end of the day, generating a business and having a positive cash flow will allow African companies, especially manufacturing African companies, to grow and to go bigger.
So when you set up a factory, I mean, was it just easy? You just built a factory, you got permission, the regulation was all in place. I mean, it sounds almost too easy. You've gone from 0 to 100 in 3 years. This sounds like almost too good to be true.
What we did during the first day, we bought a small company who was doing the microchips and all the electronics cards, the PCBs.
Yes.
So we decided to start from here because they have been present on the market during 5 or 6 years.
Right.
It was a really small company. 100% focused on the technology and the manufacturing, but as a Fab Lab level, and we decided to buy this company to take it to...
And then scale up.
Exactly, to the let's say, next stage of developing business, and not only staying at this small electronics cards manufacturing, but on a bigger product as connected medical devices and so on. Because what is important here to be highlighted is the value of the products that we are manufacturing in Africa. So if I'm going to take our case, if we had to stay in the electronics card, we are going to sell it at $10 on the market. But if you add to make it as a finished product, it will, and you can sell it at $100.
Yes.
If you are coming to add digital layer, for example, software, embedded software, so kind of application on the device, you can sell it at $1,000.
Yes.
So this is how we have to catch more value and to go on this way to be involved in the global value chains, but also to get more value for Africa.
This is crucial point, I think. I mean, this goes down to, I remember being in Congo, Brazzaville, and seeing fish that had been caught off the Congolese coast, sent to China, put in a can, and then sold at prices that many Congolese could not afford in supermarkets in Brazzaville. But there you are, you're taking a product that you could sell at $10, and you're adding these layers locally, and suddenly it's $1,000 worth of stuff. I mean, I think there's big lessons here. Now, I could go into this, but I'm going to move to Farouk, because one of the things that it seems that the businesses in Morocco have been able to count on is very good infrastructure. You flick a switch, the electricity tends to go on. Turn a tap, the water happens. You get in a car, there's usually a road that will take you to where you need to get to, etc. Farouk, you're from Nigeria. I mean, I spent enough time in Nigeria to know that not all of what I just said about Morocco is true. You're an infrastructure company, basically. How important is the infrastructural enabling environment? And what can a company like yours do on your own if the government isn't necessarily pulling in the same direction?
Thank you, David. For us in Nigeria, I think it's about that entrepreneurial spirit. We have the biggest businessman in Africa, and his story is out there.
Aliko Dangote, I mean, yes.
I mean, so...
But he has to build his own roads. I mean, I've been to his plant, this refinery outside Lagos. There was no road that could take the equipment that he needed to build that refinery.
Right.
There's no public, there's a lack of public goods, let's say.
In Nigeria, for you to get to where you want to go to, you develop the entire value chain.
Yourself.
But at the end of the day, I mean, it's profitable. So if you're in business in Nigeria, you have to plan for the long term. For us in Metro Capital, our vision is about developing our own infrastructure and our own cities in an African context. So we come up with a master plan, conceptual design, engineering design, and put it in place. The whole vision is to get Nigerians to stay in Nigeria. Yes, so the project we're working on will enable 250,000 Nigerian experts develop their potentials in healthcare, education, hospitality, and lifestyle. So, the major...
So you're building a city, just to be clear, you're trying to build a city near Abuja, or a mini city?
We're building a city within Abuja with just 2 kilometers from the international airport. And we're tired of letting Nigerians travel out to export our talents. So our target is to bring back 1,000 Nigerian doctors in diaspora by building a world-class medical city. A 1,500-bed hospital is being designed where Nigerians and the entire sub-Saharan African market can be, harnessed. But the most critical thing, I think, in unlocking African potentials is the value chain. Morocco, South Africa, Egypt have done well. We're talking about a continent of billions and billions of people. The most populous are suffering. What are we going to do to make sure the migration and, this kind of sufferings really go down? There has to be a new thinking.
Yes. So what has been wrong with the thinking in Nigeria? I mean, Buhari, your previous president, said famously, whether it's true or not, he said, we can't make toothpicks in Nigeria. As you've said, you've got some of the biggest, most incredible business people, an entrepreneurial flair, which is obvious for all to see. You just have to go to a market in Lagos. You've got some big business people, Aliko Dangote being the most famous, who's now building a $20 billion refinery. And yet there's a problem. I mean, manufacturing is a small percentage of your economy. Your politicians won't buy Nigerian cars. There wouldn't be dead in a Nigerian car. They buy foreign cars and drive around in them. Why has Nigeria not been able to go from this incredible potential?
So let's put Buhari aside. He's gone.
Sure.
Let's look at our renewed hope. We have a president who is business-oriented and business-driven. I mean, Lagos has changed in the last 15, 20 years. So the most I think difficult part is that enabling environment. If you give Nigerians an enabling environment, they can develop Africa. So we have a new president who believes in business and is ready to support businesses. There are challenges, but
Yes.
those challenges are not insurmountable.
Yes.
And I believe there is a roadmap now in Nigeria
Okay.
where this difficult infrastructural deficit will be unlocked.
Met. Okay, well, you're trying to unlock it. If you could ask for 3 things, very simple things, to be done, you can wave a magic wand, what the government can do for you to produce that enabling environment, what would they be?
Number one is regulatory.
Okay.
You should try as much as possible to make things fast.
Right, so get rid of bureaucracy as much as
I mean,
possible.
the bureaucracy is everywhere globally, but just make sure it's fast and you know what you need to take to get to a certain level.
I see.
Yeah, exactly.
So transparency of yes.
Definitely. And secondly is, I mean, you can't develop anywhere without power,
Yes.
right? So we got a bit of things wrong, but it's being put in place. You can see that everyone trying to manufacture will provide his own road and power, but still make profit.
Sure.
Amazing profit. So if that general infrastructure is there, definitely there will be more potentials for other businesses that can't afford to set up their own power to make profit and expand.
Because at the moment you had to set up your own power, which is clearly going to be expensive, yes? So you can't rely on the
Definitely.
national power.
And then, of course, cheap capital, whereby young entrepreneurs in different sectors can access.
Yes.
And there's a lot of that now coming up in Nigeria through the various multilateral agencies,
Yes.
Bank of Industry, and so on and so forth. But I mean, for us in Metro Capital, our target is let Nigerians and Africans stop shipping their talent abroad.
Absolutely.
And we are providing that environment, and we intend to expand it across African cities.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, African potentials can be harnessed.
You didn't mention foreign exchange. Do you have decent access to foreign exchange?
Like I've said to you, when you're building your business plan in Africa, you put all those challenges into context, and it's still profitable.
It's still, right.
Yeah, exactly. There is a future in Africa. Let's just believe in Africa.
Okay. Well, let's move on. I might quiz you a bit about what success you've had a bit later. But let's move to Gilles, because I mean we're talking about infrastructure. That's something that you're involved in. I mean, how important? You know, it's an open door question really. But how important is infrastructure? Are there ways around if the infrastructure isn't being properly provided by the state? Let's say. I mean, Nigeria has as much power, I think, as Manchester on the grid. You know, a small English city for 200 million people. You know, if there's that level of infrastructural provision, can you do anything? And if not, how do we unlock this key and get that infrastructure?
So I was really interested to hear Farouk's comments, because we do actually work and invest in Nigeria, and it's so interesting to compare and contrast. For example, the experience of Morocco and Nigeria. I don't want to say anything controversial, and I think there is no simple answer to your question. But clearly, the entrepreneurship, the spirit of entrepreneurship of Nigerians, who, as Farouk pointed out, they're going to have to develop the whole value chain. They're going to have to build their roads. They're going to have to build their electricity supply. That's clearly an important driver of, developing manufacturing. And I'll maybe come back to entrepreneurship in a few moments. But clearly, it's not optimal, right? Let's be honest. It's going to make. It's already hard enough to be an entrepreneur, to start your business. You don't want to have to be faced with the additional challenges of having to build the whole infrastructure environment. So, you know, our vision at the Private Infrastructure Development Group is that, as the name suggests, you know, infrastructure pretty much underpins everything. How can you have productive systems if it's taking you hours to get a container out of a harbor, if it's taking, you know, if you've got 6 hours of power cuts? So you got to stop your machines.
Which South Africa is suffering terribly from this at
Yes.
the moment with the failure of Eskom.
If you don't have, you know, good logistics or cold storage facilities where you can put your goods, you know, safely, and so it underpins everything. Then, of course, you know, that entrepreneurial spirit and supporting the private sector, as it were, that is a very, you know, resilient and hardy kind of people. That's also as important. So I would say, you know, there is no magic recipe. You need the infrastructure. So clearly there is a lot of work to be done in terms of providing energy access, you know, logistics. But you also need to support the entrepreneurs, and that leads also to the issue of financing, especially, you know, for SMEs. You know, the big industrial platforms that are doing, you know, the petrochemicals, the fertilizers, the cement, the steelworks. Those platforms typically are well financed, but, you know, we can't just develop a manufacturing economy that cranks out concrete and steel and petrochemicals, because, well, that's kind of an incomplete vision of what I would hope the future, the manufacturing future.
So you need SMEs that can get to middle company status, yeah?
You know, like Valerie was pointing out, or like Amer was pointing out, yeah, you also want to manufacture cool stuff like pharma and electronics and e-mobility, because that's going to generate a lot of jobs. That's very forward, future-facing, and typically those are, you know, more localized industries where you're going to be able to actually have a pretty strong economic rationale for inshoring rather than importing. So I would say, you know, my plea here, or my comment here, would be the entrepreneurs and the SMEs. Those really need to be supported as well, because we want an African future that includes a lot of SMEs.
So you say that. So I interviewed Sim Shabalaba the other day, the boss of Standard Bank, the biggest bank in Africa. You know, they don't lend to the little guy. I mean, they lend to big guys. They lend to the government. And he sort of said, well, that's not our job. You know, we're there to serve our shareholders, etc., to make a profit. There's a kind of a gap here, isn't there? I mean, cheap financing isn't available for lots of companies. And if it's not available, you can't really, you know, if your cost of capital is twice somebody in America or somebody in Germany or Japan, how on earth are you going to compete? Maybe you don't have to compete. Maybe it's a localized market, but you know, but we do live in a sort of a global environment. How would you possibly compete, and what initiatives are being taken and could be taken to try and bridge that gap? Because it seems to be a crucial impediment to anyone trying to, you know, to get off the ground.
So you know, I don't want to make generalities, and as you pointed out, there's 54 countries. I think the capital markets for entrepreneurs and for venture or you know, startup capital are obviously much more developed in, shall we say, the global north. So access to venture capital or early stage risk capital, I think that deserves a special focus today. And, you know, today, typically, capital markets in some of the countries in which we work are conservative. They're like, yeah, you know, real estate, that makes sense.
And they're foreign currency denominated, which builds in a currency risk. Yeah.
Don't even get me started on local currencies. That's a whole other one. But, you know, typically, you know, capital markets will be a commercial bank that's very much used to lending to real estate or to fast-moving consumer goods, or something that's got like a 3 to 4 year payback, you know, so they're gonna lend you money on a short-term basis. with a lot of guarantees, and that clearly doesn't work for entrepreneurs. So I think, something's got to change in the capital markets for ventures and for people who take, development risk. Obviously, the DFIs are working on that. We're working on that. We provide $3 to $5 million tickets, which a lot of people, that's the hardest ticket to get.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's the crucial amount. So, Valerie, if someone had $3 to $5 million to give to you to help you, are you going to take that? I mean, let me ask the question more sensibly. How have you found access to finance? You have a proposition. I want to build e-mobility here in Ghana. How have you found access to capital?
So I think if you're starting from a statistics perspective, as a young African mother in automotive in Ghana, I have basically a 0% chance by myself of raising finance. So my starting point after running my business for about a year and a half was to get a partner on board who was quote unquote more investable. And so that allowed me to raise initial funds from European markets because I couldn't find people within African markets who really believed in the vision. Every time I said we would manufacture electric vehicles locally, some of the things around, do you have the infrastructure in Ghana? If you're even going to get a factory space, you have to pay 2-3 years up front. I kept getting pushback from African investors saying, why don't we just import from China and sell? And I said, well, I don't want to buy and sell tomatoes. I want to actually create something that's going to generate value. So the next thing for me on the journey after getting a partner and raising some initial seed funding to get traction has been on how do I get finance for scale. And so the first point for us, being a climate smart technology, we actually have been lucky around being able to leverage the compliance markets. So the Ghana government supported to broker a carbon financing deal for us, so that essentially we could get a buyer for the potential carbon that we are offsetting between now and 2030.
Is that right?
Yeah, through the compliance market. But I think the challenge again then was, I now have a buyer for carbon, but I need somebody to come in and pre-finance that agreement to enable us to get vehicles on the ground. And there's not enough understanding in the carbon markets of that type of carbon-backed asset financing. And so that's really been a pain point. I think the next thing for me was around commercial banks. So somewhere like Ghana, we've had an incredible depreciation of our cedi. We already had very high interest rates, but I'll give you an example. Even if you're going to get an overdraft facility, you're talking 36% interest on a line of credit.
36% interest. So no business can
take that. And then we have some impediments in our regulatory environment that if you are going to borrow, let's say $100,000 from a finance institution in Ghana, our Bank of Ghana actually stipulates you need 120% collateral before you can borrow. So if I was going to borrow $100,000 from a commercial bank in Ghana, I need $120,000 in collateral to actually borrow. So these are some of the things on the ground that makes it impossible to get commercial finance. Where there has been innovation around carbon-backed asset financing, which is exciting, there's not enough financial institutions who understand the structures to actually come in at the level of the business that we are. And then I think finally in terms of the VCs for manufacturing, a lot of the ticket sizes that VCs are prepared to offer startups are too small, or they're asking for too much traction. And I'm like, how do I get traction if I don't get the investment to actually invest in the assets?
Yeah.
So one of the, I think, opportunities for financing in markets like Ghana and potentially Nigeria, where you have the entrepreneurial spirit, you have the need for new products on the ground, you have an understanding of why localization is important, is also for larger institutions to start to adapt their procurement policies to purchase locally. Because an example would be for us as an electric vehicle provider, if we had purchase orders from some of the larger institutions across the continent, that would actually give us an opportunity to secure revenue
Yes.
That is probably
maybe
the best
maybe
best
ADB
way.
officials could
Exactly.
drive to work on
Yeah.
on one of your e-bikes.
Exactly. So I think that's the biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs now,
Okay.
is to be able to sell.
Let me stop you there because I just want to get in some other, and I want to talk to you about that carbon thing, but probably after the panel's finished.
Yeah.
Farouk, let me just ask you just very quickly, I mean, your access to finance in Nigeria, has that been, you've got more developed capital markets in Nigeria. Have you found access to finance okay?
Access to finance in Nigeria depends on your project. If
Yep.
your project is bankable, there are a lot of commercial banks that can support you. The major problem is the tenor, long-term funds.
Yeah,
Infrastructure requires long-term funding.
10-year funding or something.
Even not 10 years. I mean, 6 to 7 years
Okay.
is sufficient. But I think the most critical thing is let's try as much as possible to localize our infrastructure ingredients.
Yes.
The reason why it's very expensive is you realize everything is being imported. So there has to be that inter-African support.
Yes.
If Morocco is stronger in certain element, they support the next country.
Yeah.
If the other country can't produce this, then there has to be that alignment.
Well, this is the African
that
Free
is
Trade
the
Agreement.
thinking
if it
I'm
works.
talking about.
Yes.
Exactly. But I mean, we have to practice it.
Sure.
Yes. And at the same time, you know, try as much as possible to see it work. Because, as
So
you know,
if-
there's a lot of talk.
Yeah.
Here is a place that is about deals.
So if you're trying to build a hospital in your city in Abuja, I mean, I'm no building expert, but presumably you need some steel. You need a steel framework.
Certainly.
Can you get that steel in Nigeria? Do you have to import it?
That is what I'm saying. We need to put so much in
So you can't,
our
because you
natural
are- yeah,
resources.
yes, yeah.
It's not about, it's not there. Is it cheaper to
Okay.
import or to get for your building materials locally?
So it might be cheaper to import it, yes.
Cheaper to import and faster. I don't know of any African country today that can produce, let's assume you want to build an affordable home in Zimbabwe or Ghana and you need 10,000 sets of sanitary wares. I don't know any African country that can produce it in 90 days.
Right.
Yes, you have to import from China, and it's there readily available, and even the pharmaceutical.
Yes.
Yes. So
Very good segue. Let's go to pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
And let's develop what our continent can produce.
Yes.
The
So
natural resources are there. Let's.
very good point. Thank you. So Mia, you know, when COVID struck, John Nkengasong at the Africa CDC, you know, famously said, this continent consumes 25% of the world's vaccines and produces 1% of the world's vaccines. Now, you're not a vaccine manufacturer so far as I know, but the same sort of things applies to pharmaceuticals. You do better, I mean, Africa does better when it comes to generic pharmaceuticals, but still, there's a long way to go. What are the obstacles for you scaling? I mean, you've got a successful model here. Can you not be supplying, you know, you said 25% of your revenue is exports. You know, can you not be supplying the health systems of Kenya, of Nigeria, of Cote d'Ivoire, et cetera, because presumably they're all buying from India and China and elsewhere. We know they are, in fact. Why can't they be buying from Morocco?
This is why first I would like to tell you that perhaps we import your medicines from China, but I can assure you that importing them from Morocco would be the same price and probably a better quality. So, and I will first say something that His Majesty the King, Mohammed VI, said in 2014, Africa must trust Africa.
Yes.
Okay? So quality, African quality is a high, excellent quality concerning drugs as far as I'm concerned. So coming back to your question, during COVID, thanks to once again, thanks to a long-term vision, thanks to smart, I would call this smart protectionism. Morocco has set up an industry, pharmaceutical industry of more than 60 companies, we are more than 60 companies, because there is a law 20 years ago. If you want to get your marketing authorizations, you have to have a real industrial site. So first, the multinationals, they started building their sites there, and now, and after, the Moroccan actors did the same. So during the COVID pandemic, and this is a real pride, and this is why for us as Moroccan today, the sky is the limit. There was absolutely no shortage on all the drugs produced in Morocco, even though the raw materials come from abroad. So not only there was no shortage on all the essential products for Morocco, but we kept on providing them, sending them in Africa.
Okay.
The only thing that was missing is indeed the vaccine.
Yes.
Why the vaccine was missing, and here we saw how unfair, how unequal the distribution of vaccine was for our continent. Why? Because producing vaccines, we are able to produce anything. We are able to produce all the drugs from anti-cancerology products.
Yes.
We produce biosimilars in Morocco. We produce injectables. We produce tablets. We can produce anything.
So could you do mRNA technology, for example?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course we can produce it. But when you're talking about such technologies like mRNA, we have the expertise. And as you said, our expertise is so high today, is a world-class expertise that our people are taken by
Yes.
the other countries. So now we have to innovate and to be creative to keep them, to keep those talents in Morocco. So concerning the vaccines and mRNA or whatever, this is a technology that needs a market size, a huge market size.
Yes.
So as a private actor, you can go in all the technologies alone, but when you are talking about such heavy...
You have to have a guaranteed market.
You have to have a guaranteed market. And once again, our king had the vision to build, to create a vaccine, and not only a vaccine, I mean a biomedical factory that has been built in, I think, 1 year or one year and a half, and is about to, it is called Marbio, and this will produce not only vaccines, but biosimilars for Morocco and for Africa.
Right, and we're seeing similar things in Dakar and in Nairobi and in Johannesburg, I think, certainly in South Africa. I have to stop you there because I just want to end with Amer, who has been sat very patiently.
I would like just, sorry, to highlight, to insist on a thing. The pharma industry is an industry that not only will bring jobs and high qualified jobs, but it's the industry that ensures sovereignty, sanitary sovereignty, but therapeutic sovereignty.
Okay.
Africa has the right to have the choice of its medicines. So when you have an industry that is integrated, then you can develop the products, and I will finish just with this. Hepatitis C, 5 years ago, you had the latest generation products against hepatitis C for the north, for the west, but in Africa, we had still to take the old medicines.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, because we've got 1 minute, 40 seconds. Amer,
now it's over.
Sorry to, I'm going to have to rush you, but you know, you also make medical products. Mia was saying that some of the raw ingredients had to come from abroad. I mean, how much are you able to make your medical products, you know, totally in Morocco, and how much actually do you have to import? And I mean, the supplementary is, and what's the potential to go further along the value chain?
Okay, today we are integrated almost at 96% at a level integration of our full value chain. So we start from the electronics cards up to the consolidation and the assembly, as well as all the embedded software applications that are integrated in. So
96% of your value is created here in.
absolutely.
Okay. What's the 4%?
It's the only semi chips that all the world is importing
I
from
see.
Taiwan.
Okay,
Exactly.
I see. So
Yes.
TMSC or whatever.
Yeah,
I see. So there's no further you can go really along that path. I mean, what are your plans now to integrate this further and to push, I guess, your product offering further? And this will be the last word. But where do you go from here?
Yeah, today we are deploying our solutions in Morocco with the different healthcare centers, but also with the public organization. And we are glad as well to have the trust of abroad countries like Saudi Ministry of Health of Saudi, where we are collaborating with them and implementing our telemedicine products abroad. So let's
You're
say
slowly expanding your market. And,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the life cycle of developing the connected medical product is important.
Yes.
We are talking about 18 months to go to the market with one product. But once you reach and you are able to reach out those steps and you have a good product fitting the needs, the real needs, it can be deployed. And I fully agree with the panelist about the health and the industrial sovereignty for local market, but also for the African continent.
Fantastic. I think that's a brilliant place to end. Gilles said he didn't want to say anything controversial. I hope we said a few things that were a little bit controversial and spiky, because otherwise we won't have entertained you and stimulated you. Please, if you could join me in applauding our excellent panel. Thank you so much.